Yeah, so we would love to hear from your perspective, kind of the journey of the documentary and your research, and everything that inspired you to research. Asa is my great great grandfather, and he's Bill and Kent's great grandfather,
Yeah, I see
and
Ken.
Helen's as well. And um, if I think my grandmother might be here.
Yep.
She
Amy's
might
on.
be here.
Amy's
She's
on.
on.
Okay,
Um,
good.
and so Asa would be her grandfather.
Got it. Well, it's a pleasure to meet everybody, because to put name faces to a name that's historic in many ways is really surreal. The project started back in 2011 or 12. I was waiting to go to the airport from my father's house in Virginia Beach, and I saw there was a book on the table called The Whispering Voices of Smyrna. And
Mm.
I picked it up and I started to read it, and I couldn't put it down. And when I got and I read probably about 20 or 30 pages, and when I got home, I ordered the book on Amazon, and then read it, and I just cut through it like a hot knife through butter. And it was an amazing story, and certainly your father's experiences there stood out in this book. And then a couple of years later, I read the book again, and so you thought to myself, boy, a documentary should be done at some point. Not thinking at the time it would be me, the one that did a documentary, but it was such a monumental event. And this past summer, a book came out. I mean, a movie came out about the whole Smyrna tragedy as well. There was a movie that came out. And then in 2018, 19, I thought to myself, let me see if I could try and get this done myself. And I reached out to the original author of, and during the time in between, I read a few more books on Smyrna and the whole Byzantine Empire and stuff like that, how it all connected into what happened, the tragedy that happened in Smyrna in 1922. And I thought to myself, let me reach out to the authors, some of the authors of the books. And I reached out to a few of them, and they all were willing to do it. And then I had the task of, all right, how am I going to tell the story here? I mean, certainly the whole scope of uh, Smyrna is so vast and large, and too monumental for one person really to tell the story. So let me focus in on your great great grandfather, Asa Jennings, because it's an American story while still being an international story, and that would certainly would be the appeal of getting recognition here in the States, because let's be honest, not many people are going to care about any Greek figures in the States, or what happened in Greece 100 years ago. So the idea was to really focus in on Asa and what he did. And then and that's how I did. I kind of broke down the film into parts, tell the story of Smyrna, tell the story of what a beautiful city it was. Certainly tell the story of the Metropolitan Chrysostomos, who was murdered there. And then there was more I wanted to do. There was one author that actually passed away during the whole interview process, to talk about how the U.S. Navy had failed initially under Admiral Bristol to save all these people, and acted slowly. And that's where your great great grandfather jumped in heroically, uh, and and um, jumped in and led the charge of the ships. I reached out to Roger, of course. All Roger, the grandson of Asa. He was instrumental. I drove up to Lake George to meet him for an afternoon. Spent a pleasant afternoon with him. Flew down to Florida to interview the author of The Whispering Voices of Smyrna. And then I had the problem with the pandemic. How I was going to get around the pandemic? So I kind of coached up the questions of the professors online on the phone, and they answered the questions on Zoom. And I hired a videographer to record a couple of professors that were in Greece as well. Sent them the questions. So I had to be creative in getting this whole thing done. And while focusing everything on your great great grandfather and your grandfather here, and that's kind of how this whole thing came about. It's a personal attachment to me, because I remember growing up in the Bronx, and my grandmother was always very, how do I say, was didn't have a good disposition. I could never understand why she was upset. And she was always save things like she would save tinfoil and lower the heat to 65 degrees. And I couldn't understand why she was like that when we were in a country of abundance. And as I got older, I understood that she had everything taken away from her during this period. My grandparents left Asia Minor; they were part of the population exchange. I don't know what the connection they have directly with Smyrna per se, if I had cousins there, but my grandparents were part of the population exchange that left, and they left everything. And who knows what else happened? My grandmother and her siblings, I believe there were 10 of them in all, went to Salonika, and from Salonika down to Athens. And her and my grandfathers were the only ones that came to America. So that was kind of the inspiration for this. And I just thought there wasn't, anything really concrete about the story, and particularly Asa and what he did and how heroic it was. And I was able to get it done somehow. Um, Took me 3 years to get it done, and it was really an incredible story. So I'll just pass it back to you, Bo, if you have any questions, or the family has any questions they want to share, or what they know about Asa and Amy, who was also heroic in this, because from what I understand, she suffered quite a bit. She saw some horrific things during this period.
Yeah, sorry, my connection broke for a couple minutes, so I missed a little bit of the story. Yeah, does anyone have any burning questions right now? I'll just open up to the
Yeah,
family.
I'll, if you don't mind, I got a couple. And Mike, this is Bill Evans. So um, let's see, just to give you kind of how we're related. My mom, who's on here, is Amy Evans. She was Amy Jennings, so she's the granddaughter. Um, as you probably can realize, none of us knew Asa Kent Jennings directly. He died at a relatively young age, but mom knew Amy Will Jennings quite well. We refer to her as Gam, was our great grandmother, our mom's grandmother. And so she knew her all through her childhood. I think my brother and sister knew Gam. I don't really, I was born in 1970, so I don't, I think Gam died a few years after that. Your video and the documentary is excellent. I've been studying this for a few years. Nothing really communicated it as well as I've seen is that documentary. 45-minute documentary, just I think is very clean. It hits the main points and things. I thought was really good. The videos were very good. I was interested in, you had to do some traveling. I think I saw some videos of you maybe in the port of Izmir or Smyrna at some point. I was curious, did you travel over to Turkey, and did you have any problems or issues with doing this documentary and dealing with either Turkish officials or people that maybe didn't want this story told?
Well, thank you. I think the emotional aspect is, very important here. So thank you for recognizing that I was able to reach that. Like I said, I've took this on as a personal mission. So I'm glad I was able to hone in and zero in on that. I did not travel to Turkey. It was during the pandemic. I was also going through some health crisis myself at the time. I actually last year needed a pacemaker, and I was very ill for a while. So traveling was out of the question. But we saw some of the professors where they were in a port. It was over in Athens. So I had a couple of professors I knew were going to be in Athens, and I hired a videographer to tape the interviews, and I gave them the questions ahead of time to kind of coax them on the direction of that I wanted to take the documentary. So I want to get to Smyrna at some point, Izmir at some point, and walk in the steps and go to the places where this tragedy happened. I do want to get there someday, and hopefully that'll be soon.
Okay, well, we're planning to do that in maybe a year.
I'll jump
Or
on. I'll jump
so
on. I'll join you guys.
well, that's why I was hoping you had already figured it all out. So,
Mhm.
but I think I was in Istanbul for just a day earlier this year. I had a layover and got to see some of Istanbul. But it seemed like a great. I mean, it seems like a very good country, safe country. I do want to. I think we're going to try to get over there and try to go walk in the footsteps a little bit of the things that kind of took place and happened there. I have a feeling, that this is not, as we've seen with the Armenian genocide that took place a few years before these instances. The Turks are very sensitive about some of these topics. So I didn't know how that would kind of go, and if we had to kind of dodge some of that. Now, I did a couple years ago. We were in Greece and we went to Volos, which is where the monument is. I got to meet with there's a museum there, and there's a part of that museum that's dedicated to the immigrants coming in. But one of the things I really enjoyed in your video too was that a lot of them, they didn't go all the way over to like the mainland part of Greece, but they were kind of being taken to just those Greek islands that weren't too terribly far away. So maybe that's because it was going to be very hard for us to find passage from Izmir or Smyrna over to like Athens or Volos, but maybe to some of those Greek islands that are over there. And I think there was one where there's a statue of
Lesbos,
a mother,
yeah.
which with children. That's not too far away from Izmir, Smyrna.
Not to my knowledge. You could take a boat there. So
Okay.
yeah, a ferry there. Yes. So a lot of the refugees went to the neighbor islands, and the Greeks, the Asia Minor Greeks, were not welcomed in Athens. They were looked at as Turks, and they were looked down upon. And in the book, The Whispering Voices of Smyrna, the family was very wealthy, and when the husband was sent to the interior, and great book, by the way, for you guys all to read. The father was sent to the interior, and the wife was able to save two of the children, and she went to Athens, and this wealthy woman had to become a maid, cleaning up and do manual labor and stuff like that. And so the Asia Minor Greeks were looked down upon once they went to Athens. They did not have an easy life to it. Many of them were in refugee camps at the base of the Acropolis, and it was a horrific, really horrific way to live.
Yeah, I think I read in one of those books that some of the Onassis family had lived in that area, and they were also maybe not part of the refugees. They probably were of already some means, but the Onassis Greek shipping family, I think, was around some of these events that were taking place at the time. So that sounds like you've read about that.
Yeah, so Aristotle was taken captive at some point and somehow escaped. He would have been part of the people that were killed at the time. You think about the people that were involved. Aristotle and Onassis. Ernest Hemingway covered the tragedies. Really, really monumental when you think about some of the people that were involved in it and how it affected. I start to wonder how different Greece would be if they were able to maintain and weren't undermined by some of the allies in the battle as they were going to the interior. If they would have captured the west coast of Asia Minor, how differently the country would have been in the later years, and would have been so broke, lack of a better word, through the next 100 years that it was, certainly. So
in your documentary, I think I read, was award-winning documentary. Is that correct? Can you talk about kind of the reception it had and recognition of the video?
Well, so it was recognized by the World Cannes. It was the best historical film for the month of May. It didn't make the final cut for the Cannes Festival, but it won for the month of May. Won for that. Now it's accepted to a winner in three or four other festivals, and recognized as a semifinalist, finalist in about 7 or 8 total festivals overall. To your earlier point, as far as how the Turks recognize this, I posted it on some academic sites as well, and I was, to my surprise, a lot of the Turkish professors that are at Georgetown and other places, they don't want to recognize this, that it happened. It's just kind of like, I don't want to talk about it kind of thing. Yeah. Which is a tragedy that you only come to a healing point if something is recognized. And it's not recognized. Some people went as far to say this is fake, this never happened. How can you put out such propaganda? Listen, and I, even at my own school, I had a Q&A with some people, and they said it wasn't a genocide. I said, look, my goal was just to tell a story of an incredible man. And I think I accomplished that. Whether someone thinks it's a genocide or anything like that, I'll let the historians battle that out. But I just want to tell the story of this incredible man. And you think of what he did, for going from the YMCA to feeding people to getting houses and then commanding ships. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, Roger even said that there were talks as far as him meeting Mustafa Kemal, which I wasn't able to verify with some of the scholars, but Roger felt that he met with Mustafa Kemal and brokered a deal. So, I mean, simply incredible when you
Yeah.
think of it.
Did you see the video that was done back in like the 30s or the
Yes.
40s about
Yes.
it? And
Yes.
I mean, they do reference that meeting with Kamal in that video, and it shows like Asa Kent Jennings with like this helper from the YMCA, which I think they were called like Friends of Turkey because they didn't want to have the Christian connotation, but I might have that wrong. There was apparently another book written about that helper for Asa Kent Jennings, because I think Asa Kent Jennings or some other folk were able to get him out of Turkey and Greece, and I think he wound up settling either in the United Kingdom or New York or something like that. He kind of had a very interesting life in his own right too. So there's some offshoots of that
Yeah.
story.
Yeah, I'm not aware of that. I want one of Ace's white hats though. And he was driving around. Imagine Ace driving around Turkey with a white hat and the Chevrolet and the American flag in the car. I mean,
Yeah,
what a image that creates.
yeah, I'm sure it is. Mom, are you there? Are you able to speak? Amy, you're muted. Maybe Bo, you can
I'll
unmute
ask her to unmute.
as a mod.
Okay.
There you are.
Yeah.
Why don't you just, if you could share with Mike and the rest of us kind of, I know you have limited, you spent a lot of time with Amy, but kind of your perspective on this story.
Well, he died in 33, and I was born in 39, but my grandmother had remarried and then later was divorced, probably when I was 7 or 8. And so I can remember there was a video, a short movie at one of the theaters in Orlando that we went to that told the same little story snapshot. But, my aunt lived in Winter Park. Uncle Asa and his family came down several times a year. And we knew he had done wonderful things, but everybody was busy with life, I guess. So it wasn't anything we sat around and talked about.
How about the emotional toll that Amy took during this whole thing? From what I understand, it really got to her, was seeing all that death and destruction and the nightmare.
I want to tell you, she was a very strong individual. She was not a weakling. She was not a person who reclined at home and cooked meals and all that. She was a strong person. She would get in her car, drive to Orlando to the
Stock exchange or
the stock market. She loved the stock market. She played the stock market. She would get in her car. She drove down there. She had her house. She had rental apartment, a duplex next door, and another house that they rented. And she managed all that. She was not a weakling at all. She was very strong.
I can only imagine. I mean, the reading the descriptions of the death and despair, and they went there to work with the YMCA, and it was supposed to be happy and jovial, and you're thousands of miles away from home in 1922. It just seems unimaginable what they went through. And yeah, to be a strong woman and you know, with Asa's sickness early on and the doctors telling her that he was going to die shortly and him saying, no, I have a vision. I'm going to Jerusalem someday. Like Roger said, I mean,
And
how do you make this up?
she supported him as his wife. But she was a strong woman. She was very strong, and she, I'm sure, managed those 3 children probably pretty independently.
Did she ever talk about Asa much growing up?
They talked about him, but but we never talked. I don't ever remember talking about the horrors and stuff, except at that movie theater that we went to. But you know, I probably was 7 or 8 when we did that. But it was really nothing you know, to be honest, you know, there was nothing we really sat around and talked about or anything. It was just normal life in Winter Park.
Yeah, you know, sometimes it's a general, you know, people go through really challenging, traumatic things like that. And I think historically, a lot of people, they just don't want to talk about it. You know, you see that a lot of times, people come back from war,
and that may be
like
it.
that. And
but she had lots of you know, like trinkets, if you will, that reminded her of her days.
Yeah. There's lots of little family piece, not furniture, but pieces like cups and saucers and little odds and ends that are from the Ottoman Empire. I've got 1 or 2 things here in the house, and I think we've got things like that the family, just things that they had picked up over there. Nothing elaborate, but just really nice little historic memorabilia.
I have a question for Mike, unless Uncle or Annette Helen have something they want to say.
How did you come about the documentary?
Oh, Dad, how'd you get it?
It's funny. I was in my brother was over there too, but we weren't together. I was in Italy a couple weeks ago, and we were doing a tour of the Colosseum, and there was this nice couple there from Athens. And since I had been to Greece just a few years ago, I was telling him about my trip over there, and I told him I asked him, have you been to Volos, which is to kind of the north part of, or a little bit further north, I guess it's more mid Greece. And he's like, oh yeah, he knew that area very well. It's like, oh yeah, it's a beautiful, beautiful area. And I mentioned, I was like, oh, if you're ever there and you're near the town hall, there's a monument there. And that was a monument to my great grandfather. I showed him a picture of it. And he's like, he kind of like knew a little bit about it. He had said to his parents had come from Asia Minor, but he didn't really, or his dad, he said his dad had come from Asia Minor, but he wasn't really sure kind of the story, similar, Mike, kind of what you kind of had to share. And so, but as I was looking, so I looked it up on Wikipedia, and there was a new reference in there to this video. And so I clicked on it. I was like, wow, this is really, really well done, because everything else, it just hasn't even been nearly that good. So so I shared it with the family on our trip, and then Bo jumped on it and really interested.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I wasn't sure if Roger had shared it with you guys or not. I actually I put in the link to Wikipedia because for some reason when you type in Smyrna fire or Smyrna tragedy, the documentary doesn't appear unless you put in Asa Jennings' name for some reason. I don't know why that is.
Yeah, I'm not sure how Wikipedia works either, but it was good to see it in there, and it was I think you capture it really well, and I don't know if we're ever going to. I think you're right that the Turk reaction, that's kind of as expected. It's unfortunate that even the ones that are kind of based here in the U.S. don't have a little bit more open approach towards that, because I think that would be good for them to address that. But I think it seems like they're just kind of in a state of denial, not only about this, but also about the Armenian genocide that took place closer to the Russian border. But if we go over there, maybe you can go over there and straighten them out.
I might be public enemy #1. I don't know about that.
That's what I was curious.
But like I said, a lot of the academics have hit me pretty hard, but I don't care. It's a true story. I'm not making this up. If we go over, we all need to get shirts with your father's great grandfather's face on it, like that. But he did a lot of charity work in Turkey after the war. Ironically, he went back to Turkey and did a lot of charity work for the orphans of Asia Minor.
Yeah, I mean, his focus was in Turkey, not Greece. So that was, his focus was the Turkish people. And I do remember, and Mom, you back me up on this, but I think Granddaddy spoke Turkish, or had, at least as a child, from when they lived there. So, Turkey was very important to them. I know Granddaddy had gone to school in Istanbul. There's a American or English-based school. I can't remember. Roger shared it with me. That's still there. That school is still there, and I didn't get a chance to go by there, but I'm going to plan to go by there. It looks like a really nice school. But apparently, both Wilbur, or we knew him as Granddaddy, or Bill Jennings, he and his brother Asa, so Asa Kent Jennings' son Asa, both went to this school in Istanbul. So, I mean, the family's focus was Turkey and helping Turkey, and that was their focus. So,
no, incredible time, and I mean, just to think it happened over a couple of week period, or it's a month period, that all this really unfolded. I mean, he was looked at. Okay, he's with athletics with the YMCA. That's it. And he wasn't even the top dog in the YMCA. He was there to assist. So it's unreal what he was able to accomplish.
Could you say more about Asa's humanitarian work? When I was talking to Roger, I was a little bit confused about, because when I hear he was a missionary, I hear, oh, he was going somewhere to start a church. But it sounds like he was really there for humanitarian purposes. So can you explain more about like his work and what projects he was doing while he was in Smyrna? And I'm also another side curiosity is, did he have any relationship to the bishop that was tortured and killed? I think it was Chrysostomus, if I'm pronouncing.
Chrysostomos. I'm not aware of any relationship he had with him. And as far as the work, it was with the YMCA, and it was direct work, helping, promoting Christian values, education, athletics, and stuff like that. So I don't believe it was a missionary, just church-based work, but it was more an overall, YMCA, what they promote as far as what they want in young men. And then after the Smyrna collapsed, he wound up staying on. Greece wanted him to come and stay with them. He won a couple of medals and honors to him that were bestowed upon him. But he wound up staying in Turkey, where all these orphans were. The details of that, I'm not as knowledgeable as I am about the events that happened in Smyrna in 1922.
Gotcha. Do you have any idea of like where he would worship on Sundays, or what his kind of religious life was like? Because he seemed like a very devout Christian who, had a big heart, and just kind of curious about that.
No, I'm not aware of anything like that. I just, from what I read, was both him and Amy were very religious, and read the Bible, and relied on the word of God, and but I'm not knowledgeable about the specifics of his religious faith, or the way he worshipped.
Bo, in Roger's book, he does go into a good amount of detail there about that, and about there was apparently like there's a lot of wealthy people that lived in Smyrna, and
Yes.
a lot of them evacuated, and a lot of those houses were vacated. And I think one thing that Asa did is one of those mansions or whatever, they turned it into a retreat for pregnant women, or maybe it was just women in general or something like that. But there was like a kind of a he set up like a women's shelter there.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes. He went from feeding bread to the homeless, to shelter for women, women that were giving birth, or women that had been horribly raped. He was taking over houses along the quay there, sheltering people and hoping the American flag would deter the irregular Turks from attacking or burning the buildings. So it's simply remarkable when you think about how the control that he was able to get in such a short time. And then as Rogers pointed out, here's a guy that's bribing the ship captains to take people on, and then veiled threats of the Greek government that he's going to expose everything to the American press about what Greece is letting their own people die. And as people saw, there were close to 20 ships in Lesbos, and you had all hundreds of thousands of people on the quay jumping in the water, being just horrible stories to go into. And these ships are sitting still, and the Greek government sitting on their hands. So you talk about someone that thought on his feet. I mean, how would I react, or how would you react in being put in a situation like this? When we think of our lives, we struggle with the little things, but to go into such a situation with such magnitude, it, really come out a hero is unreal. I mean, the guy's an international hero. I don't know what other way to say it.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible.
I have 5 minutes left. I don't have the pro plan, so when it shuts up, we can hop back on if we have more questions or things we want to talk about.
Sure, absolutely.
And this is Kent Evans. I'm Bill's brother, and I guess my namesake, named after his middle name. But and I'm not really, I can't really speak for him, obviously, but I would say, he went over there as a very religious, devout person, and having the opportunity, he went there to try to help people, and I'm sure having the opportunity to do what he did, he was probably in his own way very grateful that he was able to be sort of at the right place at the right time, where he could go on in life and realize that he had made such a difference. And I mean, I don't know. It's just that I can imagine that he also felt very grateful for being there and being able to help the people he was able to, and that it worked out. It's just amazing that he was able to cause all of that to work out the way he did, and to prevent a tragedy. And so
I don't think, I don't think he had time to think the way things were unfolding, and the way I read, he just reacted in the way he knew to react.
Yeah.
And he really didn't have time to think, and dealing with his physical limitations too, dealing with the POTS disease in oppressive heat. And they didn't have air conditioning. They didn't have, bags with wheels and stuff like that to move supplies. I mean, the physical intensity that he had to deal with was unreal.
Thank you so much for writing this book. Again, I was a teenager, I guess, in my before I had ever even heard of this. And, it wasn't in our family something that was really talked about that much, but I heard that he had accomplished this big thing, but I had never, there hadn't really been much written about it that I was familiar with, at least. And you really did my great grandfather justice, and we're very grateful that you did that.
I thank you for having the opportunity